we're just going to pick it up from right where we stopped for last week. Yeah, and we're going to, because today is going to be the final class, so we're going to look like things around for those who want to migrate into, or should I call it migrate? Let's term it as pursue a career, right, in business analysis. Probably you are doing a career switch from somewhere else into business analysis or tech as a whole, right? How do you go about it? What will your typical day look like as a business analyst, and probably the challenges you might face as a business analyst. So before we go into that, would just look at the um, the remaining part of what we've been treating, right, for the past few weeks, so that we can get an holistic view of what a business analyst does as to end, right? So we've been able to go through strategy, the analyzing what you currently have, analyzing your to-be process, able to understand the gap and solving, solutioning for those gap and all, right? So if you solution for the gap, you need to get to a stage where you have to test the new way of working, right? What we've solutioned for what we've created, how do we test that this new way will meet the needs of the end user or the stakeholder that require the solution? How will whatever you've created solve for their need, right? So that's what we are looking, we're going to be looking at today, right? Then we'll go into the other day-to-day activities of business analysts and how to move to that particular career part. Also, I think mid-session, there's going to be some sort of activity for us to play, and courtesy of Brightflare Technologies. Some would be winning some couple of things, whatever that has been prepared as the reward for that particular tax, right? So I think 3 winners, I guess, from the business analysis class. So that will be whatever you need to do will be announced midway through the class, right? So testing new way of work. What is testing? Testing is like the practice of making that of you get to know whether what you've done, whatever new system you've exceeds or fails to meet the stated objective, right? So the stated objective are things that you've documented as your requirements. Remember our shopping list that we use as requirements, right? Whatever you've documented in that requirement, what you want to create, the end goal of the project or objectives of the project, right? Testing would enable us to check if we have actually met that objective, right? Because once you start out the project, there's a baseline, meaning what currently exists, what we are at today, right? At the end of the project, you should be able to measure against that baseline. The solution I've provided, does it exceed expectation? Does it meet expectation? Does it fail to meet those expectations? Is there anything missing? For example, is there anything missing? So those are the things that testing helps you to handle, so that you can for sure say that this system I've provided or this solution I've provided is good to go. People can start using it. We've done quality assurance on it, right? So that's what quality assurance, if you've been hearing QA, right, is testing or testing in such a way that you can assure that this thing has the intended quality, right? So that's what QA is. Quality control is embedded in your governance, in your process of creating a solution, right? That's when you control quality that you want. But to assure quality, that QA itself is done via testing. So for example, if you are creating, let's say, sachet water, right? Organization that produce sachet water. So at the end of they pick like random samples because sachet water is a lot, right? It might not be the ideal example in this scenario, but to paint an idea of what testing is. So they'll pick random samples and actually take them to lab, those sachet water, right, and test, right, the pH level, the quality. Is there any there's someone's mic on trying to mute the person. So they are going to check for the pH level, things like that, whatever is required. Okay, we are recording. So whatever is required, whatever standards that has been set by, is it NAFDAC or whoever regulates them, NIS or something, whoever regulate them, they will check whether each of those things meet that required standard. So for an industry like this sachet water producing industry, they would probably test in batches. So out of each batch they create, they would have to sample some couple of items there. And the result would give them the assurance whether they met with the regulatory requirement for safety, right? The safety requirement for you being able to consume that product, right? The same applies to software. If you bring that into um, software or solution design, right? Or system implement design, right? You have to test whatever you've done, whether it meets, and you can assure the quality that yes, I've tested this, for example, a mobile banking app. I've tested everything and I think this thing is good to go because I've tested everything and it works fine. Then you can use this. The same way someone gives you a guarantee on a product, right? Most of this guarantee on mobile phones that you get and all of those guarantee and warranty to assure you that this thing has been tested and okay and it's fine before you take it home, right? So someone actually test the product, tested, certified okay, and you can go with that product and use without any issue, right? Within the confines of what has been tested. And that's what testing the new way of working means, right? So this testing is not done randomly. It's not done haphazardly. You don't just guess what you want to test, right? You know, you've documented some things that we want initially, that our shopping list. Oh, we want to be able to produce this kind of custard. We want to be able to produce this kind of bar soap. We want to be able to do this, do that, do that. And we've documented a lot what the stakeholder needs to do. And during our solution, in designing of the actual solution, we were able to implement it, right? So after implementing it, we need to test those items, whether we met those items or not. It's just like you committing at the beginning of the year, this is my New Year resolution, right? And at the end of the year, you have to go back to those resolutions to check if you actually met all of them, or you do quarterly appraisal of yourself if you are meeting some of them so that you can cross correct, right? So I think we mentioned approach. So if we've not mentioned that approach of implementing your solution or system, so people can use agile method, which enables flexibility, right? And there's a waterfall method, which is linear. So look at agile method as someone that has a New Year resolution and is availed the opportunity to check whether they are meeting those resolutions quarterly or say every month end, right? You check. If you're not meeting it, you cross for correct in the next month, you improve. You pick on another objective in the following month, you improve, and you keep layering, adding up to it until you fulfill all your New Year resolution, right? You can't start everything and fulfill everything in January sometimes, right? So some probably I want to buy a car this year, right? You might be fulfilling that maybe at the 6th or 7th month of the year. So you keep doing that, you keep adding to it until you've completed the full New Year resolution. So that's agile way. But in the waterfall method of working, right, there's no way to for you to say you want to iterate, right? You implement all or nothing. So that's what they do. So in the waterfall method of working, you keep working all through, keep working everything, pack it all together, and at the end, then you test, you check whether you've implemented everything. Meaning at the end of the year, that's when you appraise yourself if you've done the right thing or not, right? So that's the two difference between those approach, right? But there's a strategy to it that you should follow, the approach that needs to be taken, right? The stages that you need to pass through, right? So those are the strategies that you need to be able to also define the teams, the people, or whoever needs to undertake that test, right? Do you want your tester, a QA, to be the one doing the testing? Do you, as the business analyst, want to be the one doing the testing? Or are you going to give the solution to an end user or a stakeholder to do the testing, right? So they do it from their end and you record whatever result it is, right? Also, you need to know the responsibility of those undertaking the testing. So whoever is taking the testing, what are their responsibility? Are they just to test the solution, click through and click whether each of those things is working? They can log in, they can sign in, they can log out. Is that all they need to do? Or they need to click on it, check it. If they're working, also document it, right? Whether it's pass or fail, or they have to defer that test to another time, right? So their responsibilities also matters, whoever is doing the testing, right? Then some responsibilities can also include you, the tester, bringing some of your personal data to test. So for example, I want you to test, say, a social media app I just created, right? Your responsibility as a tester would also be you bringing maybe your personal email. So I should know the responsibility. And if I'm the person providing the email that you use to register to test, right, then we should know. So those things need to be set. Then under which condition will the testing take place? This is number 5, right? Are we going to make it full user interaction without burgeoning, right? So we just give it to them without instruction and let them find their way through. We want to test how intuitive our application or our system is, right? So we just um, we shadow them or we observe them, whatever they are doing, just to be able to look at how user would interact with that system without any instruction. Because most times people will download those applications from your Google Play Store or your Apple App Store, right? And start using. So you want to see how intuitive it is during testing. Probably it's difficult for someone to locate forgot password, right? Or it's difficult for someone to locate where to make payment. So you just observe, right, without giving instruction. While some, you can say the condition is that I'll provide you step-by-step detailed guide on what to do, right? From here, click here, log in here, input your name here, input your username here, check if you are able to log in. If you are able to log in correct, you will mark it as pass. If you are not able to log in, you mark it as failed, right? So we have to define those conditions under which someone is able to perform those tests, right? And other conditions include things like preconditions. So if someone wants to test if they can log out, right? The condition for you to be able to log out means that you must be first logged in, right? So that's a precondition that needs to happen before you can actually test logout, right? If you want to test transfer feature on your banking app, the precondition should be that you should have logged in, you should have some significant amount of credit in your account, right? Before you can initiate transfer. So those are the preconditions. So all those conditions, you have to define them, how the overall testing is going to look like, and also precondition for each of those tests. Each of those items that you need to test, you have to define the conditions. The environment requirements of testing, right? That's number 6. What is the requirements of the environment? So are you going to make the testing happen on a laptop, on a Windows, or on a mobile phone, or they will use the browser on their mobile phone or an application, right? Those things revolve around the environment in which the test is happening. Will the person be able to access it remotely? Will they have to be there in person? Is it a manual system that they have to print something and they have to be on site? All of those things revolves around the environment of the testing, right? Environment can also be the actual code environment in which you are testing from, right? So if the code has been deployed on maybe a sandbox or in a staging environment, right, it also determines, meaning the environment that you have before you move into production environment. So those things you can research it, the different environments. You see a developer working on their local environment or local system, right? That's where they create the code of whatever application you've been using, right? Then they will push it to like a central repository where all different developers push their work concerning that system that is being built. This portion is called the dev environment. That environment is called the dev environment. So they've pushed from local environment to the dev environment. The next environment they usually push to after dev environment is the staging environment. And the staging environment is like a clone of the last environment, which is called production environment. So that staging environment is where this testing we are talking about often occur, especially when it's user acceptance testing or system integrations testing or regression testing. It usually occur in this staging environment. So it's where we would ascertain whether everything is fine before we now push to production environment. And production environment is where you and I, the end users, can use the application, right? So now, for example, in WhatsApp organization, that's Facebook, right? Meta. For the WhatsApp application, they might have a lot of feature in their staging environment that they've not released to us in production environment as end users, right? So there are things like that. So those are different environments. So you have to determine the requirements of that environment that the testing has to happen, right? Then the success criteria for testing to be classified as pass or fit for purpose, right? So in a ideal testing case or when you are carrying out tests, even after providing the steps that someone needs to take, right? You do this, you click on this, you click on this, all the preconditions, right? And the actions that they need to take. If you've documented that, you also need to document like the expected outcome. Meaning if you enter your username, something like that, and password, and you click on login, you should be able to access the home page of the application, right? So that's the expected outcome, access to the home page of the application, right? So if a user have gone through those steps and precondition are not able to access that homepage of the application, then they are not meeting up with the expected outcome, right? So the expected outcome determines whether a, a test is classified of as passed or fit for purpose. And that expected outcome is called the success criteria, right? So if you can meet up with that success criteria, then meaning it translates that you've met the expected outcome of that process that you've gone through, right? So if I'm telling you that if you put a pan on fire, you pour oil, you light up your gas or whatnot, and you put a plantain in it, or your raw plantain, and you leave it for say 3 minutes, you should get a fried plantain. And you follow those exact steps, right? And you got a boiled plantain, then meaning the test failed, right? Because the expected outcome is a fried plantain, but you're getting a boiled plantain, right? So that's really what it translates to in simple terms. So all the products that you find yourself using, all of them typically go through this testing phase, right? To test whether you get the expected outcome, right? So if I say all the product goes through it, there are some products that you can't test individually, right? Like the one I mentioned, the pure water one, right? That you have to take some few samples out of a particular batch and test whether they meet up with the standard. Because if you now decide to test each sachet water, then you've defeated the purpose. Which one are you going to sell when you've like opened each of those sachets, right? So for example, someone producing notebook, and you decide to test that each of those notebook and each of those page within the notebook, you can write with a pen on it. At the end of the day, you've written on all pages of every notebook you've produced. How are you going to market it, right? So they take samples out of it. But in case of software that you can input data, is data that you input and it's being stored somewhere, and we can erase those data, right? We can revert, right? So those items we can test end to end. And that's why they do rugged testing for those kind of items, right? So anything outside of production, construction, and all of those things, you do, if it's software systems platform, you do end-to-end rugged testing because it's reusable, right? So they do those end-to-end testing of those use cases. Now, how will the test be managed, tracked, and reported? So are we going to create all those preconditions, steps, and actions, expected result, the result of the test, whether pass or fail? Are we going to manage it in an Excel? Or are we going to put it on a project management software like ClickUp, JIRA, Azure DevOps, Trello? Are we going to use Microsoft project, Microsoft project? Are we going to use sheet of paper to track it? Just draw it on a sheet of paper and start tracking, right? So you have to define how this testing will be managed and tracked and reported. How you're going to report that, oh, we carried out 54 tests, right? Out of the 54, we about 40 passed and 14 failed, right? So how are you going to track the one that failed? That you ensure that your developers rework those ones and ensure that it's done. Those ones that failed will be timed as bugs, right? So like defects, and developers needs to fix it to produce the expected outcome, right? Is that expected outcome that determines whether they pass or fail, or whether it's a defect or not, right? So developers have to work on those items and fix it. Now, how do you track those items so that you ensure that everything is fixed, right? So you put that in place during testing also. Then the key risks and areas of concern are stated by business or supplier. So sometimes during testing, that is when some business owners or supplier, remember, business analyst is the bridge between what technology and the business team, right? So sometimes during testing is when your supplier or your business guy is telling you the risks of some parts, right? So it's telling you that, oh, this login you've created, you need to add OTP to it. We've had cases of hijack of accounts, hacking of accounts, and all of those things. So things like that can come in, right? And you look for how to mitigate those risks, right? So we might have designed something beautiful, but it comes with its own risks in some aspect based on the nature of the business that we are doing, right? So you can identify key risks or any area of concern and approach it going forward. So that is what testing avails you. But in all I've mentioned, you would see that for you to do all of that, you have to plan that test. Because if we don't, what do they call it? If you don't plan to, is it what do you call it? If you don't plan, then you plan to fail, right? Okay, yeah. If you don't plan appropriately, then you are planning to fail. So if you want your test to go as smooth as possible, you need to plan for it. The same way you plan for your full project, right? You do your project planning, or you do your business analysis work, the tasks that you have to go through, you plan for it, right? The same way you have to plan your testing, because testing is so crucial also because it's the gateway, right? Whatever we can't find out in testing, remember, after testing, would approve it and it goes to the production environment, meaning it gets to users. So all of those bugs that you see sometimes, that you click something on your phone and the app shuts down and something happens, unexpected result, right? Those things as escape testing. Probably they couldn't find it or flag it due to the environment that they are testing on. So maybe the test on that application was done on iOS, right? And during usage, you as the customer, you are using it on Android, or it was done on Google Chrome, the test, and now you are trying to access that particular website on Safari, and it's giving you some funny behavior, right? That's why you see some of these government sites too, they'll tell you it is best accessed on using Chrome, because they've tested it in Chrome and they know it's working. So they can't assure you of any other website. So they will advise you to use Chrome, any other browser, I mean. So they will advise you to use Chrome so that you get the expected result and you don't encounter any bugs. Because this testing is the gateway of the product. So whatever this gate does not catch, right, and ensure they fix it, is going to go out there to the end user. So hence you need to ensure that you properly plan for it and you properly execute those tests to figure out whatever defect is remaining so that you can fix them as quick as possible. So there are like 4 steps that people usually go to, or tech teams usually run through during planning, right? Which is the plan phase, where you create your test plans, you create your test script. There's something called test scripts and the acceptance criteria within the test script. So I won't go into all of that. You can research that, right? These test scripts, or sometimes you find, most times you can find templates online, right? The same way you have templates for different items. For example, in your schooling, right, during your projects, writing your project or thesis, there are templates for those projects, meaning you have to go through introduction, abstract introduction, literature review, methodology, maybe whatever chapters that remain, right? There's a laid down template. The same way you can find templates online that shows you how to structure your test plan, right? Probably you start from your epic, your feature, your user story, the test case description, the test case ID, then you go into the preconditions or the actions that needs to happen to execute, then the expected outcome, then the result and any comments. So they do that in columns, maybe within Excel sheet, right? So those are like templates that you can use. But if you go online, you see example of test scripts, right? So you plan everything, how you want the test script to look like and stuff like that. How many cycles you want to run? Do you want to run this test 3 times or 2 times or once, right? So you do that. All of those are in the planning stage. Who is going to manage the test? Who is going to record it? Who is going to track it? How do we ensure that we fix any defect? Everything is your planning phase. Now, execution phase is actually when you now carry out the test, right? The test execution itself, and you get the actual result. You evaluate the result. Oh, 40 out of 54 passed, 14 failed, right? Then you log those things that failed as issue logging for your developers to fix them. That's the execute phase. Then after the execute phase, you go to the review phase, meaning whatever you've logged, all those issues, that those defects, right? You have to analyze them, prioritize them, correct things, right? That's what you do in the review phase. So you go over them again. Oh, this one is more important than this. Let's fix this first. Then we can go on to fix this remaining item CDE, right? Let's fix AB first, right? Then you analyze that, you prioritize them, and you effect those corrections. Now, having effect those correction, right? You don't just go back to your stakeholder that we've effected this correction, come and test again. it doesn't make sense, right? So that's why we have these test planning phases to guide you what to do. After effecting the correction in that review, right, you now do regression testing. Regression testing means that you have to test from the beginning of the application to the end of the application again, end to end. Why are we doing regression testing? Because a simple change of code in one place can affect another place in the application, right? So probably you are storing, let's say we are using okay, for login, let's assume you are using email as username, right? Email. Now, during the testing, we found out that stakeholder did not actually say email, right? They mentioned username, but didn't tell us what exactly to use, and we've assumed that is phone number. That's a costly mistake from the business analyst for not getting the actual thing. But let's use that for sample case, right? And the end of the day, they said, oh, change it to phone number, right? Use your phone number as your username, then you can have your password. Now we change that bit, not knowing that even not it doesn't only affect login alone. During you making transfer, it validates your username. During you resetting your PIN, it has to check your username. During you maybe submitting FAQ, it has to use your username to as identifier, right? That this is the customer requesting it. So that username that you've changed in that login alone, it's replicated. That same data is being used in a lot of different places. And you don't want one change to now start causing ripple effects in different parts of the application that you are not aware about. That's why someone needs to test end to end again. Yes, we've made one change, but I will test the whole application again to be sure that that particular change you've made or that correction you've done does not affect, is not affecting anywhere else, right? It's not causing issue anywhere else. It's just like your find and replace on your Word document or Excel. You do Control H, right? And you type in find 0.5, right? Replace it with 0.6. And the thing actually replaced everything in your document where you want it and where you don't want it, right? You did replace all instead of replacing that one item. So it could mess up the whole document. The same way someone can mess up the whole code, right? Just by implementing one change. And someone needs to test it. Who usually does that is the quality assurance guy. But sometimes in some businesses, the PA also serve as the quality assurance. So you have to do that regression before you now call the stakeholders to execute again. If you notice the arrow on top from regression is putting you back to execute, right? So those are the test plan you put in place and the steps you follow in test plan until you do everything and you are not getting any issue, right? You are evaluating your results and everything is fine. Everything is pass. Then you can move on to deployment phase, right? So in testing,